Just want to share with you a fascinating article I have just read in the Catholic Herald. The Catholic Herald is a Roman Catholic publication based in the UK. I read it online, and there's a really interesting article by a guy called Niall Gooch entitled, "If Men Will Not Be Governed by the Ten Commandments." I'm just going to read it to you and then make a few comments by way of perhaps an Islamic response to what he writes. And he says, "If men will not be governed by the Ten Commandments, they will be governed by the 10,000 commandments." So said G.K. Chesterton, articulating in a memorable way the truth that a society made up of those who will not govern their own moral behaviour will sooner or later become less free, as the government resorts to ever more coercion and regulation to minimise the consequences of unrestrained human sinfulness. I think of this aphorism often nowadays as our authorities, in the UK he means, with little success, use the law to contain forms of bad behaviour which, until very recently, were widely understood to be the preserve of manners and morals, transmitted organically through non-political social institutions like the family, churches, youth organisations, and so on. A couple of months back, for example, Transport for London, that's an organisation that runs the buses and the underground and so on here in London, they began putting up posters on the underground, the subway, and buses too, reminding men that intrusive staring was unacceptable and might be reported to the police as a form of sexual harassment. In April, a senior British transport police officer reiterated that they would prosecute people suspected of such behaviour. More recently, posters have appeared targeted at men, insisting that they refuse to tolerate their friends' sexist and misogynist jokes on the grounds that such jokes are the first steps on the road to committing sexual assault or violence against women. Such initiatives are clearly well-meaning, but the fact that they need to happen at all shows the steep cost of our endless war against limits and constraints on behaviour, and our increasing reliance on the pliable and woolly concept of consent as the only benchmark for morality. In the bad old days of repression, so-called, the public sphere was largely kept free of sexually explicit behaviour and references. Reticence and modesty regarding sex, and indeed most personal matters, were considered the order of the day. This was rooted, of course, in Britain's long Christian history. It undoubtedly had disadvantages, but it also meant that in public you were unlikely to be confronted with sexual imagery and sexualized behavior. I don't mean that what we'd now call sexual harassment or intrusive staring was unknown, but rather that they were unusual and to many people literally unthinkable because of the social and legal norms in place. Now we think we know better. We have what we feel like an almost pathological openness about every aspect of people's lives, and reservations about sexualized public sphere, reservations about a publicly sexualized sphere are regarded as old-fashioned and puritanical. This leads, however, to a chaotic and confusing situation for many people, and this is where I think the author of this article makes a really interesting point. We're encouraged to be open about sex. Pornography is widely available. Highly explicit sex scenes can be shown on TV and films, and huge billboards can feature people in revealing underwear. But personal interactions are governed by very strict rules. Now, approached in a rationalistic way, this is defensible, he says. It is all about personal choice and freedom, modern people would say. But this is astonishingly naive, he writes. It does not suit human nature as it really exists. The Christian anthropology, in other words, the Christian understanding of our human nature, understands that appetites, once aroused and indulged, are hard to control, and that we cannot compartmentalize them so easily. We realize that there is a fundamental contradiction in wanting a public life that is as relaxed as possible about all forms of sexual display, and where chivalry is ridiculed and looked down upon, but also one where men are enjoined to behave towards women in public as if it was still 1952. I'm not sure why he picks 1952, but you get the sense of an age gone by. It is not so very easy to have good things when the religious and social norms that underpin them have been kicked away. And there ends that article. I think many Muslims would and traditional Christians would recognize the profound insight into that. Now, what about Islam? Well, as we know, Islam is characterized by its modesty. Ibn Abbas reported in a hadith, the Messenger of God, peace and blessings be upon him, said, "Truly every religion has a character, and the character of Islam is modesty." Abu Hurairah reported, the Messenger of God, peace and blessings be upon him, said, "Faith has 60 to 70 branches, the best of which is to declare that there is no God but Allah, the least of which is to remove something harmful from the road, and modesty is a branch of faith." There are many, many examples one could give from numerous hadith and statements in the Quran to the same effect, of course. In the West, however, many people equate dressing modestly as being oppressed. However, many female reverts, these are converts to Islam, report that when they began dressing modestly after converting to Islam, they felt more empowered than ever before. One said, "I became in control of my body and was newly able to choose who could see me." Contrary to the common narrative in the West, dressing modestly has empowered me and given me a newfound sense of security and confidence. And as we know, in Islam, the concept of haya or modesty is a distinctive quality of the faith. Many Muslims observe modesty both in their outward appearance and also through their inner self in regard to their actions and character. Men and women alike are commanded in the Quran to observe modesty. And this, I think, is another instance of how Muslims in the West can contribute to the public good by their wholesome example. Until next time.